Are you really that doer? Or could it be that that doer is just cause and conditions coming together, and then doing emerges out of those cause and conditions coming together? Yeah. Okay. Good. So, hi everyone. Hello.
It's not a diamond throne, Ajahn.
What was that? Diamond throne, is it? Okay.
To adjust it.
Yeah. You can be the boss there. Adjustment boss. Okay. Oh. I do. Yeah. It's working. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Hello, everyone. How are you? Good. Are you sure? Yeah. Everyone always says good. I don't believe it. It's just kind of what people say. Anyway. It's nice. So today, you wanna? Yeah, you look like the boss. Allow me to
No,
start
I'm
out.
sweating bullets around here.
Yeah, great.
All right. So glad evening, everyone, brothers and sisters in the Dharma, fellow venerables of the Mahasangha. How are you feeling today?
Great. Fine.
What? Okay, I don't sense the spirit in there. Maybe we can do it with more spirit. How are you feeling today?
Great!
Awesome. So before we start, I just want to make sure that everyone's feeling comfortable around here. So any first timers in the cradle? Wow, that's a lot. All right. So just to introduce the cradle home. So basically, this is a home as like a safe space for us to practice the Dharma alongside with our spiritual friends. So in case that you need to use the restroom, you can head straight over there. The door leads to the toilet directly. And if you're a coffee lover like Ajahn Bramali, you're welcome to make a cup of coffee for yourself at the pantry over there. It's a home, so please make yourself feel comfortable around here. So before we begin, we would like to invite Venerable Sir to do the puja of the three refuge. Please give me a moment.
Do the request.
Yeah. Okay. Everyone, please rise.
Yeah.
Venerable, we request the three refuges and the 5 precepts. Oh, sure. All right.
Mayang bhante ti saranena saha pancha silani yachama dutiyampi mayang bhante ti saranena saha pancha silani yachama tatiyampi mayang bhante ti saranena saha pancha silani yachama.
Okay, wow, that's really good. Yeah, I'm very impressed. It's partly chanting, partly pretty good. Should everyone sit down, or do you want to stand up? Well, please sit down. Yeah, so relax. Okay. So the way we normally do this, at least the way I normally do it, I don't know what they do here, but so usually I will say something in Pali first, and then you say it afterwards. Can? Yeah,
Yes.
can. Okay, good. Okay, so here we go. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
I like the Sri Lankan way of saying it, Namo Tassa. It's nice, isn't it? Obviously, Kesri Ramananda is the inspiration behind this, so you have the Sri Lankan accent. Because I kind of used more to the Thai way of doing things, so you say more like an A at the end, but I think the Sri Lankan is probably more original, because Sri Lanka is part of the Indian sphere, so well done, you're very original. Okay, so here we go. So now we're going to do the three refuges first of all. So again, I say first, and then you say afterwards. Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tit saranagamanang nititang.
Amabhante.
And the 5 precepts come now. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kame sumicchachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya majjapamadhatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya majjapamadhatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena suggating yanti. Silena bhoga sampada silena nibbutting yanti. Tasma silang visodaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, very good. That's marvelous. Can we take this one down a little bit? Anywhere? Is that possible? I'm not sure which one it's supposed to do. Just maybe twist it a little bit or something. It gets a little bit in my eyes. That's good. That's better. Yeah, that will do the job. Okay, everyone. So nice to be here at the Cradle, and we did the most important thing first of all, right? The most important thing is keeping the 5 precepts. So well done for starting out with the most important thing, because it is the practical aspect of the Dhamma that is the most important thing here. So is it loud enough, first of all? Because it got a bit less loud after we put it down, so hopefully it will be all right. So, and the reason why I say that the most practical, most important thing is the practice and the practical aspect is because today I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of free will. And free will, how it relates to the Dhamma, what are the implications of free will, or what are the implications of no free will, maybe? This is kind of one of the things we want to talk about. What does that mean? How does this affect our Dhamma practice? How should we think about this? Also, you may think this is very theoretical, because free will debate, I don't know if you have been part of the free will debate, but it kind of goes on around the world in various places all the time. And there are people in the pro camp and people in the against camp. And so I want to make the case for how to think about this as a Buddhist. And when I say as a Buddhist, I mean, how did the Buddha think about the idea of free will? Can we say anything about that? And once we have a clarity about whether the Buddha taught free will or did not teach free will, then we can talk about the consequences. What does it mean? Does it mean that we have a certain... Does it change our attitude to the Dhamma? Does it change what we have to do? Or is it roughly equivalent regardless of whether you believe in free will or not? So this is what this is going to be about. So the door is over there, so if you get fed up with this talk, you know where you have to go. Yeah, it's easy. So one of the things about Dhamma talks, one is allowed to actually leave in the middle of the talk. I think in Asia that's not the done thing. Yeah, Asian people are so polite. They don't walk out in the middle of the talk. Yeah, it's kind of because traditional Buddhist, not quite traditional Buddhist country, but Malaysia is kind of in between a little bit. Yeah, large Buddhist population, so people tend to have a different attitude maybe, and that's kind of nice. But let's start out with this idea of free will. Now, one of the reasons why I want to talk about this is because you may have noticed that this is a very common theme around the world. Some of the kind of great luminaries in the Western world, they will talk about free will. It's become quite an important topic. You may have heard about people like Sam Harris. Have you heard about Sam Harris? Kind of one of the Western intellectuals who talks about politics and talks about Buddhism. Actually, he's kind of a semi-Buddhist. He meditates, he's done all kind of Buddhist meditation retreats and all kind of things. But he's also like a public intellectual with his own YouTube site and millions of followers and all of these kind of things. And his argument, or he argues that there is no free will. Free will doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so it's kind of influential view in the world. There's another very famous person a fellow called Robert Sapolsky. Have you heard about him? And Piadase, you are. Robert Sapolsky is a professor at Stanford University in the US, one of the great universities in the US. And he wrote a book recently called Determined. Yeah, and this another one is an extensive argument that there is no free will. And in the Western world, this idea of whether there is free will or not is a very important thing. And the reason why it is important is because it comes with Christianity. Yeah, and Christianity is like the rock bottom, if you like, of Western culture. It comes from Christianity. And Christian ideas and theology, how to think about spirituality from a Western point of view, is obviously very influential in this Western culture. And according to Christianity, free will is required. Yeah, why is it required? Well, because we all know that there are so many... Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. You're doing the practical aspect of Buddhism, an act of generosity. That's much appreciated. But according to Christianity, we all know that there are so many problems in the world. Yeah, there are all kind of natural disasters. We have people doing all kind of bad things to each other. This is what the world is like. We have wars going on in the world right now. People treating each other in all kind of terrible ways. And from a Christian point of view, the only way you can explain that is that there is free will. Because if there is no free will, then who is to blame for all the problems? Well, if there is no free will, then you have to blame God. Yeah, because what else is there? If God creates us without free will, then God has to take the blame. But if there is free will, then we are to blame rather than God. And of course, from a Christian point of view, it is not satisfactory to blame God. Yeah, and so people have to have free will for that reason. So this becomes a very important topic in Western culture. And this is why Western intellectuals very often like to debate this. Well, these days, many people in the West are much less Christian. Christianity is kind of not so interesting anymore. And so they debate whether free will really is a reality. Is it just a Christian idea, or is there such a thing as free will? And many modern people in the West, they reject the idea of free will. And for good reasons, right? If we are just a conglomeration of phenomena, we are just a kind of set of molecules and atoms and subatomic particles and fields and all of these kind of things, then where does free will fit into that? The laws of physics are not about free will. The laws of physics are about how the world evolves according to certain rules and certain principles. There's no real room there for free will. And that's kind of the argument of the modern atheist, non-Christian people in the Western world especially. And so for this reason, it becomes kind of interesting. And for this reason, it's also, where does Buddhism fit into this? Yeah, where on the scale is Buddhism? And I think the answer is very simple, actually. According to the Dhamma, there isn't really any scope for free will either. And there are many Buddhists around the world, some very kind of prominent people. There is a very famous professor at Oxford University called Richard Gombrich. Have you heard about Richard Gombrich? Yeah. So he was a professor of Sanskrit at Oxford University for 30 years. And he was very prominent, and he would talk about Dhamma and Buddhism quite a lot. And he would argue that, of course, there has to be free will, because if there is no free will, how can you be responsible for your actions? It's dying out a little bit, not quite working here. Yeah. Okay, so let's try again and see what happens. So he was arguing that how can you have free will? And how can you not have free will? Because then how can you be responsible if you don't have free will? Yeah, that's what makes you responsible. So is that a good argument? This is one of the things I want to cover in tonight's talk. So, but for me, it seems very obvious that there cannot be any free will. Looking at the Dhamma, looking at the way the Buddha talks about this. And one of the most obvious places to look at this is in a very famous sutta, a very famous discourse of the Buddha called the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. Have you covered this in your decradle course? No, I haven't? Okay. One of these days we'll have Niwa and he will do the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta for you. It's a beautiful sutta. It's very profound. It's very hard to do. So I will be very impressed with Niwa, and if you can, I'm sure he can do a good job of it, but it's very profound. And one of the things Anatta Lakkhana means, anatta means the idea of non-self, right? Anatta, atta is self, and lakkhana is characteristic. So it's the characteristics of non-self. What is it that makes something non-self? This is a fundamental teaching of the Buddha, that there is no inherent essence in a human being. There is no soul, there is no self, there is no ultimate referent to who we are as human beings. And so this sutta then makes the case, the argument for why that is the case. And one of the things he does, the Buddha again goes through the 5 khandhas. The 5 khandhas are the 5 aspects of a human being. So you have the Rupa Khandha, which is like the form, the body, the appearance of a human being. Vedana, which are the feelings, sanya, perception. Sankhara, and that's the interesting one. What is sankhara? Sankhara is basically the will. Yeah, that's what the sankhara is. The Buddha is talking directly about the will in the sutta, one of the 5 khandhas. And the last khandha is consciousness. So this is what kind of makes us human beings. Yeah. So we are aware, we have a will, we perceive the world, we feel the world, and we have a body or a form, if you like. And so what does the Buddha say about the will? Sankhara. What does it say about, often translated as intentions and choices and various kind of ways? He says that you cannot choose your choices. Yeah, that's basically what he says. Yeah, you cannot say, may my sankhara be like this and not like that. May my choices be like this or not like that. And if you cannot choose your choices, if you cannot decide what you will choose or your intentions, well, then it must mean that they are conditioned in another way. You are not the master of those choices. Those choices come about because of cause and conditions. And so essentially what that means is that there is no freedom of the will. You cannot choose this or you cannot choose that. It comes about because of the various forces and conditions and circumstances in the world, and then your choices are formed. They emerge out of that, all of these circumstances and conditions in the world. And then your choice happens as a consequence. You think that's true? Does that make any sense? Do you think I'm just talking nonsense? Venerable, talking nonsense. it's profound, right? It's kind of hard to relate to that. What do you mean, the choice, you can't choose your choices? What does that even mean? What does it mean that your choices are conditioned? Surely when I pick up this coffee, I'm choosing that, right? That's free. If I didn't want coffee, I just put it back again. So do I want it or not? Okay, now I'm getting unsure. Do I want coffee? Whoa, that's kind of it's on the cusp of wanting and not wanting. Okay, I'll have some coffee. No, not have coffee. Oh, this is free will, right? You're choosing one or the other. Okay. Coffee will, that's right. So how can we kind of integrate that with this sense that we have in our daily life, that we do have free will? I can choose the coffee. Yeah, when I came in here, they asked us, do you want some water, or do you want a cup of coffee? Then I can choose, right? I can choose one or the other. So how can we make sense of that as whether you have no free will? And the answer is that it feels like you have free will because it feels like you can make that choice. But whether I choose coffee or the water is basically the reason I choose coffee is because I like coffee more than water. That's why I choose it. And so the question then becomes, why do I like coffee? Yeah, why do I like coffee? And the reason I like coffee is because that has been conditioned into me. Yeah, I had friends who like coffee, I had family who like coffee. And I started drinking coffee because, okay, everyone else does, so you have to kind of do that. Yeah, you know what it's like. You just do what everyone else does. This is kind of human beings for you. And so you kind of get conditioned to like that coffee. You get conditioned to drink coffee. It is not I never really chose to decide to like coffee. It got conditioned into me. And so when I make that choice, it is not because it is a free choice. It is because I like coffee already. That's why I choose the coffee. Is it free? It is free only insofar as I can choose what I like. But what I like is conditioned. What I like is not a choice. Should it be higher up? Have I created a problem for you because I put it down? Maybe it's my fault for asking the impossible of you. So do you see what I mean? Our likes in the world, what we prefer, what we actually enjoy, that is conditioned to us. So when you make that choice and you think you choose what you like, you are choosing what you like, but what you like is preconditioned, and so your choice is already given beforehand. It feels free because you are choosing what you want, but actually it is not free because what you want is already decided beforehand. And so in one sense, you can say that freedom of the will and lack of freedom of the will is kind of similar. Yeah, it feels like you are free because you're choosing what you like, because it's preconditioned, it's not really free after all. And so this is why it is hard to kind of understand this concept of freedom of the will, because it feels free, well actually it is already predetermined beforehand. So this is how you can kind of start to understand what is going on. Yeah, there isn't really any freedom, it just feels that way. And of course the point that the Buddha is trying to make, he is trying to make us understand the idea of non-self. And one of the most significant aspects of the idea of non-self is to look at the areas within your five khandhas, within who you are, that you take to be a self. Yeah, this is kind of the point. What do we take to be a self? Do you take the consciousness to be a self, your feelings to be a self, your body to be a self? And one of the areas that we often take to be the self is the agent. Yeah, the agent is me. I am the agent in my life. I make the choices, I do this, I do that. Yay! I work at the cradle, I make the cradle a wonderful place. Yeah, and then I choose to become a monk. Is that right? Did I choose? Presumably, yeah, I must have made that choice at some point. And so we identify with the doer, and that's why we enjoy doing. That's why that's why we do so much creative work. That's why we enjoy working together to create the cradle. It's wonderful that you have created here, this Buddhist community coming together, creating future leaders and what have you. It's a wonderful work. But the problem is that you identify with that. Yeah, we are the doer in our lives. And the point that the Buddha is trying to make is that as soon as you identify with something like the doer, you have to investigate. Are you really that doer? Or could it be that that doer is just cause and conditions coming together, and then doing emerges out of those cause and conditions coming together? And this is the point of non-self. The Buddha is saying it's cause and conditions coming together. There isn't really any self there. So when you feel that you are the doer, you are the chooser, you have very good grounds for investigating that and seeing if it is really true. Yeah, because this, you can imagine that this is what the Buddha would talk about in terms of non-self. Wherever you attach to that idea, there is very possibly a problem. Otherwise, the Buddha wouldn't talk about this. So the answer is that probably, yeah, very likely there is an illusion there. If you think you are the chooser, because the Buddha has a theory of non-self, if you think there is a chooser, if you think that you are doing that will, in other words, it is free, it is coming from you, coming from some essential you, then it's very likely that you have a problem and you're misunderstanding what is going on. Am I making any sense to anyone? Yeah? Okay, good. It always makes sense from my point of view. Yeah, I know what I'm saying, but may not make any sense from your point of view. What is this monk talking about? Let him, send him back to Perth. I don't understand a word of what he's saying yet. So this is the thing, yeah? So what happens if this is true? What happens if the Buddha is right, that there is no real chooser, there isn't really any free will, all the will is conditioned? And it has some very interesting implications, some very powerful implications. Because what it means is that we are not really in control of our lives in the way we think. Yeah, again, we feel in control. That's the whole point. It's feeling of choice, feels in control. But if the Buddha is right, that feeling is wrong. And the implications of that are quite disturbing. Yeah, it means that we are moved around in the world according to all of these cause and conditions. We think that we are doing this. I'm going to be a Buddhist. We think we're going to be a Buddhist. But actually the reason you are Buddhist is because of cause and conditions, not because you want to be a Buddhist. And one of the things that I always thought, because I've been a monk for, you know how long I've been a monk for? Don't know. 4 years? 30 years. Yeah, not 40 yet. Do I look that old? Wow, how scary. You can almost, now you almost, no, that's okay. So one of the things that I have always been thinking about is, why did I become a Buddhist monk? And when I started out the monastic life and I went to the monasteries for the first time, I thought, yeah, I'm a Buddhist monk. Why? I want to do this because I'm smart, I'm wise, I'm intelligent. Yeah, wise people, they become Buddhist. They don't do anything other nonsense. Yeah, they become Buddhist. That's kind of the really smart people. And so it kind of, my ego was very satisfied, yeah, with me being a Buddhist monk. And so it felt like a big choice. Yeah, surely when you make a big choice like that, it's coming from you. Yeah, it's a free choice. Otherwise, what kind of choice is it? And my parents were not happy. Yeah, I know here in Malaysia, if the children want to become a monk or nun, parents are not happy. Same thing in Europe. Yeah, no difference. Same thing everywhere. My parents were not happy at all. And my father said to me, I did not raise you to become a Buddhist monk. I said, what? That's what he said. And that changed later on. But initially, it was not very popular in my family, the idea of becoming a Buddhist monk. And the reason, of course, is they had no idea what Buddhism is all about. They thought it was a cult. They thought I was being brainwashed. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being brainwashed. If there is no self, no choice, what can there be except brainwashing? I'll come back to that later on. So I decided to be a monk, yeah, and I thought this was a good idea, go to the monastery. And it felt like I was making a choice because I was going against all the people around me, against everything else. It felt like a very strong choice. But then as the year progressed, as I carried on being a monk over these 30 years, I started to look back. And the more time passed, the the more it felt like maybe it wasn't really coming from me. I started to think back to my childhood, and as a child, sometimes I wanted to kind of live in the forest by myself. Where did that come from? Wanting to live in the forest by yourself? That's kind of a strange idea for a little child, yeah? Mommy, I want to go and live in the hut in the forest by myself. No, can't do that. Yeah, you're too young. Yeah. Wait till they grow up. Okay, and then finally I grow up, I want to do it. They can't do it. They don't like it anyway. Anyway, you know what it's like. So the more I looked back on my life, the more it seemed like there were cause and conditions there that were kind of driving me in that direction. And after a while, I started to see more of those causes and conditions. I had wanted to live in the forest as a child. I remember when I was in my 20s, I wanted to travel to Asia. When I was 21, I was an exchange student in a university with a company in Japan. So I went to Japan. When I was in Japan, I read my first Buddhist book. I went to monasteries. I saw the Buddha statues. I went to the old capitals of Japan, Kyoto and Nara. And I saw the monasteries and the monks and all these kind of things. And it kind of felt nice. There was something about it that was kind of familiar, yeah. And so the more I thought about it, the less it seemed like it actually was a free choice. It seemed like conditioning. And eventually, finally, my kind of final understanding of this was that actually the real reason why I'm a Buddhist monk what do you think? The real coffee. No, it's not. You don't get. Actually, I get a lot of coffee as a monk. You should have seen my kuti. My kuti was like a coffee shop. Yeah, there was coffee everywhere because everyone knows this monk, he likes coffee. So everyone would give me coffee. I got far too much coffee. I had these bags of beans everywhere. I became the kind of the dealer in the monastery. I was dealing coffee to everyone. Yeah, like the drug dealer. Yeah, so I was giving out coffee. That was actually a very nice thing to be able to do. You had to give coffee to everyone. But no, the reason why I decided eventually why I'm a Buddhist monk, it became quite clear to me after a while. I must have been a Buddhist monk in a past life. That's why I'm a Buddhist monk now. And that's why it felt natural. That's why I had these fantasies as a child to live in the forest by myself. That's why I recognized something when I was reading Buddhist books. That is how it works, right? You recognize things. It must have come from a past life. And that is kind of, that was, in a one way, it was nice. But in another way, it was also a bit scary. Because if it comes from a past life, it means that you haven't really chosen in this life to be a monk at all. It came from cause and conditions so deep in the past that I had no idea those cause and conditions even existed. That felt like I was being railroaded to become a monk. I was on these tracks, yeah? Instead of the feeling that I had that I was choosing this freely, that's what it felt like. Instead, it became something like something you do because you have no choice. And so you start to understand that that feeling inside of you is completely false. Yeah, it's almost like your sense of self is being challenged in a very profound way, and you understand there's a falsehood there in how you view yourself and how you view your life. And so I understood that being a Buddhist monk is like a habit, just a habit. Yeah, good habit, right? A really good habit. Yeah, we can agree with that. But nevertheless, a habit. I became a monk because it's a habit. And so that kind of changed my view of everything in a very profound way when I started to look at things in that way. And it started to look more like a trap than something, or possibly a trap anyway, because when we are all just following cause and conditions and habits, it's more like a trap than a free choice. And so what that led me to then, well, if this is a trap, I better check out these Buddhist teachings. And so I started to read the suttas, read the word of the Buddha. I learned the Pali language. You know that? I know Pali. You know that? No? Now you know. So, so I've done lots of translations and all kind of things because that's kind of part of the idea of being a Buddhist monk. So you learn Pali, you read the suttas in the original language. I would have liked to learn Middle Chinese as well, because Middle Chinese is how the Buddhist sutras are translated into Chinese language. But I realized I'm too old to learn Middle Chinese, too hard, too many characters to remember. So I kind of gave up on that one. But I would have, if I started early, I would have learned Middle Chinese as well. Maybe Tibetan, yeah, certainly Sanskrit. All of these languages are kind of the Buddhist languages of the world. And so it kind of led me to really investigating the Dhamma. What is the real Dhamma? Who is the Buddha? What did he teach? Because I wanted to know that I wasn't just trapped in something, but I was choosing something for the right reasons. So it had a good consequence, right? It makes you investigate in the right way. And this is one of the very important lessons that comes from this understanding that we are just conditioned human beings, that there is no free will. The importance is that you understand that if you are entirely conditioned, you have to make sure that you are conditioned by something really good. Yeah, so it actually opens up your ideas about the world. It makes you understand, well, if this is really true, it means that the conditioning I get from the world around me is incredibly important. I have to make sure I am conditioned well, not conditioned by bad things. That's what it means, right? And so if you are a Buddhist, and if you have confidence in the Buddhist path, you have to ensure that you are conditioned by Buddhist ideas in a very profound and deep way, and that you don't allow the other conditioning, which is also going to be there, to take you for a ride down the garden path in the wrong direction. Because that's what conditioning does. It can take you this way or that way. You understand the importance of that conditioning. That conditioning, another name for that is brainwashing. I told you I was going to come back to brainwashing, right? When I first came to Bodhinana Monastery, the Ajahn Brahm would say, have you come here to be brainwashed? Actually, I'm not sure if he ever said that. It's just a false memory implanted in my mind, I think. But in Thailand, sometimes Ajahn Chah, Lumpur Cha, Ajahn Brahm's teacher, very famous monk in Thailand, and he would say sometimes to people coming to the monastery, have you come here to die? Yeah? And people say, whoa, what is this? What kind of cult is this? This sounds too dangerous. And of course, the idea is the dying is like the dying of the sense of self, the dying of the ego. That's kind of what it is about. Yeah, have you come here to die in that way? That's a nice kind of dying, yeah? Killing off the anger and these kind of things. And the Bodhinyana equivalent, have you come here to be brainwashed? There's a similar kind of idea. Because the truth is we get brainwashed anyway. So we have to choose our brainwashing. Choose good brainwashing, don't choose bad brainwashing. That's kind of the lesson of non-self, that there is no choice. And so you understand the importance of the input in your life, how important it is to have right view, to understand the world as it actually is. If you misunderstand the nature of the world, if you have wrong view about things, you're going to make incredibly bad choices. Yeah, wrong view always leads to bad choices. Have you considered that? If you have wrong view about the stock market, Billy, are you invested in the stock market? No, not anymore. Okay, very wise of you. Too much uncertainty, right? So if you have wrong view about the stock market, if you have a bad stockbroker who tells you this stock is going to up, that one is going to go down, actually it's the other way around, you're going to lose a lot of money because you have wrong view. If you have a good stockbroker who has inside information, I should be saying this. If you have inside information about the company, that's like right view. You're not supposed to trade on inside information, but if you do have it and you do trade, it means you have right view. You might end up in prison, but you still have right view. And so you have a right view, and then you make money. And everything in life, I'm not saying you should do inside trading. Just to be absolutely clear, I'm just going to give you this as an example. So please don't misquote me on this one. The point is simply that when we have a right view, we can make good decisions. When we have wrong view, guaranteed you will make bad decisions. And so you want to have that right view. It becomes incredibly important. Where does that right view come from? It comes from the Buddha. It comes from the noble ones. It comes from those people who have an understanding of the Dhamma. It comes from your fellow friends and acquaintances here at the Cradle, at the BGF, at the larger, broader Buddhist community around the world, from the Venerables here, yeah? From all that community. That's where right view comes from. And so you hang out with the Kalyana Mittas. This is why Kalyana Mitta, spiritual friends, good spiritual friends, why that matters so much. Because that is where the right kind of brainwashing happens. Yeah, the Buddhist brainwashing that makes you nice and pure, cleans out your mind, yeah? Give a nice, pure, bright mind. That's what happens when you get the Buddhist brainwashing, yeah? And so, once you understand what is at stake, what the problems are, you start to seek out the right kind of people, seek out the real Kalanamittas, and allow that brainwashing to really kind of clean you out in the right kind of way. So there's a very close relationship between the idea of no free will and the importance of Kalyanamitta and right view. If there were free will, you would be like a pillar. You would have an essence that would be able to withstand the conditioning of the world. But because there is no essence, because there is no pillar, because there's nothing in you that is permanent and can withstand the conditioning of the world, because that doesn't exist, the conditioning is so important that you understand the incredible importance of Kalyanamittas. So make sure you allow yourself to be conditioned by Kalyanamittas. Make sure that you come back to the basic teachings of the Buddha again and again and again, trying to reflect on them, understand them, make them a deeper aspect of your understanding of the world, getting more clarity, more right view, if you like, through that conditioning process. Hang out with the Buddha. Yeah, hang out with the Buddha means reading the suttas. Yeah, that's what it means, hang out with the Buddha. So that's kind of the idea here. So hang out with the Buddha. Make the Buddha your friend. Make the Buddha your Kalyanamitta. There's a sutta we just read out the other day where the Buddha is your number one Kalyanamitta. So this becomes the consequence of no free will. You understand how important it is. Don't trust that feeling within you. Yeah, I am strong. Yeah, I can withstand all of these scallywags. They can say what they like, but I know that Buddhism is the best. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, you are not that strong. You may feel strong, and that feeling of strength comes from a misunderstanding of who you actually are. It comes from a sense of self. Actually, you're not very strong at all. You are weak. Sorry. We are all weak. Or the strength, rather, is not really ours. If we are strong, that too comes from conditioning. And so once you understand this, you understand that I have to always, to the best of my ability, be around the right kind of conditioning. This is the most basic, the most important understanding that comes from this view of no free will, that we have to ensure that we get conditioned in the right way at all times. So this is what I really recommend to you. Make sure that you always come back to these Buddhist teachings, that you hang out with the right kind of people. Look around you. Are these people all the right ones that I'm hanging out with? Which one is right? Which one has a right view? Which one has a wrong view? Okay, you be careful. So you are more careful. You are more circumspect about what you do. So this is number one lesson, from non-free will. Another lesson I want to bring out very briefly is that it makes you more careful when you choose things in life. Very often when we make choices, when we have intention, when we go one way or another, very often we're just relying on our past, our habits. Our old habits are just playing out again and again and again. And this happens especially if you have no mindfulness. When you have no mindfulness, it's just the past repeating itself. You're just following a pattern from the past. And so one of the important lessons of no free will is that you have to allow the Dhamma to arise in your mind. If you don't allow the Dhamma to arise in your mind, you will just be subject to the habits of the past, subject to the conditioning of the past. It would play itself out again and again. There's no wisdom there. It's just the past playing itself out. So what you want to do whenever you make a choice, you want to allow the Dhamma to be in the driver's seat. So how to do that? And one way to do that is to go more slowly in your life. Wait. I'm making a choice, especially if you're making important choices. Wait a little bit. Hold on. What should I really be doing now? And very often, if you are driven by the past, you are going to be driven by defilements like desire and maybe ill will, or certainly delusion, guaranteed delusion, yeah? Because that's kind of one of the biggest habits of the past. And so instead of allowing those things to be in the driver's seats, including the ego, you wait and you ask yourself, what is the Dhamma answer to this question? What would the Buddha say here? What would the wise people at the cradle? Who are the wise people at the cradle? Niwurna. Is it? Maybe it's Niwurna. I don't know who it is. Whoever are the wise companions in your life, yes? What would they say? What would the Buddha say? What would the Sutta say? What would Ajahn Brahm say? My teacher was Ajahn Brahm, yes? So I kind of asked, what would Ajahn Brahm say? And so you wait till an answer arises in your mind. And many of you have been around long enough. You know what the Dhamma is. You know what the real answers are. And so very often you just have to wait and hold back. And then when the answer arises, when you feel the Dhamma is there, and very often it's like an intuition. You know that this is coming from Dhamma, it's not coming from self. And when you know that, then you can make your choices. And I was giving the simile just the other day. I'm down at the BGF Center. Yes, I'm down there, kind of hanging out there. It's a really nice center. And I just heard that the Cradle is looking for something similar, also wants a nice center in the future. So this is also pretty good, but things will change. And so I'm hanging out at the BGF Center when I have these nice sutta classes every day. And I was telling a bit about how we all have this tendency to react too fast. And I was saying how I live in Perth. Have any of you been to Perth? No? Yes? You've been to Perth? Okay, one of you. Only one person. Okay. Two. Billy, you have been there. Okay, great. So in Perth, we have this large property. Yeah, Australia is a very large land with not so many people, and so it's quite easy to buy large properties. And so our monastery now is like over 500 acres. Yeah, so it's a large land. And the nuns, even larger. The nuns is 580 acres, the nun monastery. So, and you can do that because it's not so expensive. If you try to do it in Malaysia, you would kind of need to be a billionaire to be able to kind of afford that. And so I have this kuti, and in my kuti is like a hut in the forest. When I'm in my kuti, I can't see any other kuti. Yeah, like I have forest around me, forest and kangaroos and mosquitoes and ticks and that kind of stuff. Kind of the wildlife around us. And not so far from my kuti, I have a toilet. Yeah, so toilet in my kuti is just a hole in the ground. It's kind of up the hill behind my kuti. The best kind of toilet. There's just air. There's no smell in this toilet because there's no walls. So it's just kind of hole in the ground. And there's like a plank, and you remove the plank, and you can do your business in this toilet. And the problem is, it's like 50 meters away from my kuti. So I have to walk these 50 meters every time. And because this is the forest, sometimes the trees kind of overgrow the path, right? And so one day I was walking, and as the tree was overgrowing, I had to kind of bend out of the way and push the tree or whatever. I thought, I'm going to chop down this tree. Of course, you can't do that as a monk. You can't really chop down the tree. And so you go to the Anagarika and say, Anagarika, this tree is in the way. Yeah, and then they come, and if they are smart, they will chop down the tree. And if they're really stupid, they say, yeah, I know it's in the way, whatever, and they walk off. But then I thought, why should I chop down this tree? Yeah, wait a little bit, see what happens. And so I waited a little bit. And when you wait a little bit, suddenly you realize there is another opening in the forest. Just go a little bit to the left, go a little bit to the right, and there is an alternative path. Or over there is a dead tree, there's a dead bush. Just push it out of the way, and then you can walk. And this is the idea, it's a simile for life. Yeah? Life is often like that. Don't act too quickly. Because if you act too quickly, you do things that may not be required. Maybe you end up as a monk killing that tree, or getting the Anagarika to do it, which maybe is not really nice. It's nice to have trees around, nice to have forest. And so very often you just wait. Another alternative opens up. The Dhamma shines through. The Dhamma points the way to what you should be doing. Very often, if you act on impulse, if you feel the strong compulsion inside to act, very often that compulsion comes from defilement. Yeah, anger compels you to act. Anger says, now you must act. Tell that person off now. They need it. I've got to do it now because otherwise it might be too late. Okay, tell them off. That's the compulsion of anger. The compulsion of desire is you have a strong desire. I must eat this thing now. I must have this relationship or whatever it is. Now I've got to act. Why? Because the desire is so strong. So the defilements are these very compelling forces. And so to be able to stop can actually be quite hard. Yeah, you have to wait, allow that compulsion to pass away, and then you make the choice afterwards. That is the right way of thinking about this. And then you can start to live in line with the Dhamma. You allow the Dhamma to arise. There is no free will. You should not be in charge, because if you are in charge, it means the ego is in charge. And the ego is just a construct of the imagination. It doesn't really exist anyway, says the Buddha. And so because it doesn't exist, how can an illusion make good decisions? Have you ever thought about that before? How can illusions make good decisions? If the ego is an illusion, how can it possibly make a good decision? It's basically impossible, right? And so we want to get the ego out of the way. So if you feel the ego is there, driven by ill will, driven by desire, wait. Yeah, that is always dangerous, because the ego is blind. The ego has no idea what is right and wrong. The ego is always wrong. Why? Because it is an illusion in the first place. Illusions cannot make good choices. And so you wait. You allow the Dhamma to kind of arise up, percolate up within you. And then when the Dhamma comes up inside of you, and you feel that this is the Dhamma, you can intuit that this is right, then you make the choice. Then you act accordingly. It's a beautiful way of living in life. Yeah, you go more slowly. You reflect properly. You allow the Dhamma to kind of come to the fore rather than all the other silliness that exists inside of us. Yeah, we all have that experience, I'm sure. I certainly have that experience too often. Yeah, all the silliness, all the stupidity within. So glad to leave that behind and allow the Dhamma to come to the front instead. So this is how you live when you understand that free will is an illusion. If you think that there is free will, well then the ego may be right, because the ego may be precisely that free will. It may be an expression of the free will. But if you know that there is no free will, then the ego is blind. And when the ego is blind, you have to allow the Dhamma to decide instead. And this is how you do it. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I hope it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, that's okay. It doesn't have to make sense. I'm just saying things, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, that's also okay. So, okay, let me just have a sip of coffee. So I just kind of. So these are two ways of using the idea of no free will to enhance your practice of the Dhamma, yeah, to make sure that you're heading in the right direction, to make sure that you are not kind of swamped by the conditions of the world that hold you back and destroy your practice of the Dhamma. But I want to get back to this idea of free will again. I'm going to go backwards to the beginning, and I'm going to ask another question that is very interesting in my point of view. Is there another way of thinking about the idea of free will? Is there a Buddhist equivalent of freedom of the will? And this is kind of really interesting, because in Buddhism we do talk about freedom, right? You practice to the very end of the path, you get two things. You get vidya and vimutti, knowledge, insight, and freedom. Freedom is one of the main reasons why we practice the Dhamma. Everyone wants to be free. Is there anyone here who does not want to be free? If you don't want to be free, you better leave now, because this is going to lead to freedom somehow. No one wants to be in prison, especially when you see the prisons. Yeah, I'm just told the prisons here in Malaysia are not very nice. Yeah, you get locked up. Oh, I don't want to be there. It's terrible. We all want to be free, and there are many ways in which we can be free. One of the most powerful freedoms is the freedom of the mind, when the mind does not feel confined, constricted by all of these terrible things inside of us. And so one of the problems in life is that we cannot make good choices because we don't understand what the good choices are very often. Or we have no ability because our mind is not developed in such a way that we can make good choices. So say, right now I can choose between coffee and water. It doesn't really make much difference, right? It's not that's not really the big deal. But my real choice would want to be to choose to be happy. But can you choose to be happy just like that? And you can't. If I say, be blissful, you can't be blissful just like that. If you have suffering inside, the suffering is there. And so we are constrained in our ability to be happy. We are constrained by the conditions of the world. And these constraints, where do they come from? They come largely from the defilements of the mind, the desires that we have, the ill will that we have, and the delusion that we have. This constricts our mind and constrains our mind. So we cannot make good decisions. We cannot make decisions that make you happy. The only way that you can actually make decisions that are happy, you have to be free of those constraints. And this is the Buddhist idea of freedom of the mind, of freedom of the will. The freedom of the will is the will that can make real choices that make you happy. And the only way you can make those choices is to remove the defilements of the mind, because defilements of the mind will stop you from being able to make those choices. Do you see what I mean? The moment you take away the defilements of the mind, you can choose deep meditation. You can choose insight. You can choose awakening. But right now, even though awakening may be the highest happiness in the world, that's what the Buddha says, you cannot choose it. And the reason why you can't choose it is because you are constrained by these defilements in the mind. If I say, choose samadhi, you can't. You may not even know what it means exactly. And the reason why you don't is because of these defilements. And so the freedom to be happy, the freedom to have insight, understand the nature of the mind and the world, comes from removing those defilements. And that is the Buddhist idea of freedom of the will. Then when you make a choice, you can choose to meditate peacefully here. You can choose to be happy here. You can choose to go off, live in the kuti, live in a cave by yourself, and bliss out for 7 days in a row, like the Buddha did, yeah? That is so beautiful. But the only way to do that is you have to liberate the mind from the defilements. And so this is a Buddhist way of thinking about freedom of choice. And it's a far better way of thinking about the freedom of the choice, because it leads to really good choices, choices that are really valuable. The ordinary way of thinking about freedom of choice is we can choose between water and coffee. Big deal. Who cares about water or coffee, right? I mean, it just makes almost no difference. But if you can choose samadhi and insight, wow, then it really matters. But the only way you can do that is by removing the defilements in the mind. That is where real freedom arises from. So that's what you should all be aiming for. And that is why the Buddhist path is a path of purification of the mind, removement of those defilements, that then allows the freedom of the mind to arise from that. Then you can make good choices. But there is one last point, as if I haven't made enough points already. I apologize for making so many points. But there's one really beautiful and profound and important last point, and that is that the very act of choosing is itself a problem. Every time you are choosing, the mind is moving, and the mind that is moving is actually slightly painful kind of mind. If you want to be truly happy, you actually have to give up choice altogether. And when you give up choice, when you give up intentions, when you give up the movement of the mind, that is when you can find the highest kind of happiness. Because that happiness is found in samadhi. That kind of happiness is found in deep meditation. And it's only found when you give up all kinds of choices. And you may have heard, sometimes, I don't know if you listen to the talks by Ajahn Brahm or not, I don't know if you do, but sometimes when Ajahn Brahm is in the mood and he gives a really profound discourse, he will say things like, Buddhism is not about freedom of choice. I have just told you how poor freedom of choice is, water or coffee. No, Buddhism is about freedom from choice, because that is the real freedom. When you give up choosing, that is when the mind becomes really, really profound and really beautiful. So at the end of the day, you realize that this whole debate about freedom of the will is a misunderstanding, because the will itself is actually a problem. It's when you give up the will, when you give up choosing, that is when you can experience some of the most meaningful, profound, and deep experiences that are available to humanity, including to everyone in this room. That is where you find the deepest meaning, the deepest purpose, the highest happiness, and everything that you ever wanted in your life, ultimately finding the meaning of life itself. People don't understand that, but the Buddhist path is the path to finding the meaning of life. That's what the path is about. And that's kind of extraordinary. If you want to find that meaning of life, forget about the freedom of the will. Find the higher freedom of the will. Let go of all willing, and then you will discover that meaning for yourself. Okay? Okay, enough. So good, great. So very glad you were willing to listen to all of that. So now, very happy to open up for questions and answer or comments or whatever, or disagreements. You're very welcome to disagree with me, but please, fire away, as they say.
Before we move into the Q&A, I just want to interject here by saying that we have Ajahn Bramali's book, which is Flowing to Freedom.
Wow, it's a really, really good book. I recommend this one. Yeah? Wow.
This is my, I've actually sponsored 300 copies. So those of you who want to purchase, it's 60 ringgit. Drop it in the small little chest there, the brown chest. And I've also asked Ajahn that today can he stay back a little bit to sign some of the books, and I think Ajahn has consented. I recommend this one. I've read it twice, 3 times now. And it's actually pretty much about what Ajahn has been talking about so far in this talk. So this is highly recommended. Please buy for yourself, for your friends. And it's very rare to have Ajahn. Ajah's first time here in the cradle. So I'd like to say a big sadhu for that. And so thank
you so much for sponsoring the book, Niwan. That's really very kind of you. Much appreciated.
All right. So please, so you can just drop the money in the chest, and then that's it. You can just take the book. Yeah. If you don't, you can still take the book.
Do you want to say what the money goes towards?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the money, the contribution actually goes to the Dhamma-ditta project.
No, it goes to Santi.
So sorry, it goes to Santi Monastery. The Santi Monastery is in Sydney.
Yeah.
And it is the nuns, Bhikkhunis monastery. So it will benefit the Bhikkhunis who are in that monastery. And this was the original intention of that project, which today we are trying to continue that here. And so just that will be the contribution that we make toward this project, which is the purpose of this book, right, Ajahn?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just to make that first before I pass to our host for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Brother Niwan. So, as Brother Niwan just said, if you can't find Ajahn in Malaysia, you can always find him in the book. Yeah, so please do support. So right now for the Q&A session, I would like to request for everyone's cooperation in the interest of time to keep the questions sweet and short. Yeah, so try not to give poetry or Dharma talk.
Before that, so that some of you may not carry cash, you can QR, there's a QR code. Oh, wow. That will go into the Cradle account that we will eventually collect, and we will find a way to get it to Sydney somehow. Okay, please right away with the Q&A.
All right, so anyone would like to ask the questions? Please raise your arm. Oh, Brother Kevin.
Hello, Bante. Thank you for your talk. It has been insightful. So, during your talk, you repeated many times on the free will. You said that our life are preconditioned, and then to find meaning in life, we have to follow the Buddhist path. It's only then that we'll find real meaning in it. So does it mean that first of all we have to remove all the defilements, our freedom of the view? After that, only that we fill it up again to find the real meaning of our life. Is it that?
So you're asking whether it's first of all
so
to
we
remove
first,
the defilements?
yeah, because that our life are being led by our free will. I mean our desires, our cravings. Yeah. From that we'll have all the defilements. Once we remove the defilements, then we fill it up again with the positive things that is taught.
That's basically what it means. It means you have to remove the defilements. But one of the interesting things is how do you remove the defilements? And one of the really nice ways of removing the defilements is to do good. So if you do a lot of good in life, if you are a generous person, you are a kind person, you speak nicely, you act towards people in a nice way, you have metta and compassion in your heart, actually that will reduce the defilements. Very often we think that reducing defilements is about restraint, about holding back. That's often very painful to restrain all the time. So a nice way of thinking about it is just doing good. And by doing good, you will gradually be able to remove those defilements, and eventually you will gain that sort of insight and understanding. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brother Kevin. Thank you, Venerable. Oh, Jason.
Hi, Bhante.
Hi.
Okay, I have a question. Two questions actually, in fact. One was you did mention that everything is by condition, right?
Yeah.
So does it mean that I just live my life like this and let condition drive me by?
No.
Because if everything is going to be conditioned, so if it's going to happen, then So it's going to be.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. But not quite, because you have a sense of self. And because you have a sense of self, you have a sense of agency. Yeah. And so even though that agency ultimately may not come from you, it feels like it does. And you have no choice but to act on that sense of agency. So what you do instead, you are kind of worried about it. Yeah, if it's all cause and conditions, I better make sure I get the right cause and conditions. That's the right way of thinking. So you don't allow everything to flow. Rather, you are concerned about which cause and conditions you allow to work on you. And this is one of those principal points, of the results of that. You understand that the conditioning you get is incredibly important. I'd better be careful to ensure that I get Buddhist conditioning as much as possible, hang out with the right kind of people, get the Kalyana Mittas, and allow that to work on you. Yeah, is that what you're asking, or am I misunderstanding you?
I think in a way, yes. As if,
Yeah.
So Bhante is saying that actually everything in life has a condition, but it's a choice I make to wish how. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all conditioned. So ultimately, the fact that you choose the Dhamma is also conditioned. Yeah, you're conditioned by your friendship, all these kind of things. But that fact that you understand that there is no free will, that understanding becomes another condition.
So it's like, for example, when they say the coffee and the coffee and the water, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I say I don't want to. Actually, I don't like coffee.
Yeah.
But just to keep myself awake,
Yeah.
I made a choice to drink the coffee.
Yeah.
That is not free will anymore.
It's not free will. That's also conditioned. Yeah.
It's conditioned for me to choose the coffee. Can I say that?
It's conditioned. Yeah. It's conditioned in the sense that either you like the coffee and then you drink it, or you don't like it, so you don't drink it, or there's another condition in which you want to be awake, and then so you drink it for that reason. So it depends on which one is strongest of those conditions will win at that time.
I think I have
Yeah.
best one.
Yeah.
Yes, you did answer my question. Thank you,
Yeah.
Bhante.
Okay. Great.
Good evening, Ajahn Bram.
Good evening.
Bramali.
Yeah. Do I look like Ajahn Bram? Ajahn Bram is more kind of like this,
Earlier on, you mentioned about there's no pillar, but I remember there's a sutta mentioning about pillar.
Yeah.
That as we learn more about Dhamma, like it deepens in us. So I would like to have some more explanation about that pillar.
Yeah. So the Dhamma influences you. That's is that what you're saying? Yeah. Yeah. So the way that the pillar is sometimes mentioned in the sutras, is this idea that according to the teaching prior to Buddhism, an individual is like a mountain, solid mountain, standing like a pillar, firm, immovable, right? And that is considered the wrong view according to Buddhism. So this idea that we are firm like pillars and immovable is this idea that there is a self inside of us that is stable and unchanging. And that is actually a wrong view according to the Dhamma. We are not stable like that at all. We are always moving depending on cause and conditions. And so that is the idea from the Dhamma. However, you could say that once you reach a certain point in your practice, once you become a stream mentor, a sotapanna, you may have heard these terms being used here, yeah? Then you become a bit like a pillar, because then there is only one way, only the way towards awakening. Yeah? So at that point, you become strong like a pillar, because you know what the Dhamma is. So the conditioning, in other words, is so strong that it's only driving you in one direction. But prior to that, you are like this, this boat on the ocean. That's actually in that book. You know that? Yes, in the book. Yeah, it's like the simile of the boat on the ocean. So we are all like boats on the ocean. You're like a hull. The hull is like just the shape of the boat, but there's no engine there. There's no sails. There's no oars. There's nothing to drive it in any direction. It depends entirely on the current and the wind. Yeah, it goes according to the currents and the winds. And we are a bit like the boat on the ocean without any steering mechanism. There's no rudder. There's no oars. There's no sails. All there is like the wind and the currents of the ocean, and that drives us around. So you are like that. You're this person depending on external conditions. You have no inner rudder, inner sails that drive you in a certain way. That's the right way of thinking about it. So when you are drifting on the oceans like this, you want to get into the Nibbana wind, the wind that takes you to Nibbana, the Eightfold Path wind. Yeah. So you look out for the Eightfold Path. Okay, Eightfold Path is this wind here. Okay, let me get into that wind. Yeah. So you try to maybe you use your hands a little bit to take you into the Nibbana wind, yeah? And then you drift towards Nibbana. That's the idea. But essentially, before that, we're kind of just drifting around, and we have no sense of proper direction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Ajahn, the Dhammapada verse 1 and 2, Manopubangama Dhamma, how does that fit into this discussion? Because that verse, those two verses, does suggest some level of freedom to choose what we want, because that's what the term says, Manopubangama Dhamma, that what we choose,
What it means, it just means that the mind is incredibly important, right? The mind is the forerunner. Pubangama means goes before. The mind goes before all other things. The mind is primary, that's what it means. And so wherever the mind goes, the rest of your actions and speech and everything else follows along. Yeah, it's like the simile of the ox goes first and the cart will follow behind the ox. Yeah, kind of unerring kind of thing. So it just means the mind goes first. So the choices are important, but it doesn't say anything about where the choices come from. Yeah, that's the point. The choices come from conditions. They don't come from an inherent self or a free will. So the choices are important. I'm not saying the choices aren't important. They actually matter a lot. And that's why we want to have the conditioning of the Dhamma. I didn't really say that during my talk. Maybe I should have said that. But choices are very important to make the right choices. And that's why they should be done in accordance with Dhamma rather than in accordance with the ego or some defilement or some kind of other stupid thing. So that's kind of what it comes down to.
So from as I understand it in a nutshell, basically choosing to live in the Dhamma is itself changing all the conditioning.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is the solution, basically.
That is the solution.
Choosing to live in the Dhamma.
That's exactly right.
And that is the changing all the unwholesome conditionings, like anusayam, whatever, affecting our decision making.
And that choice comes in part from the fact of understanding that your choices are conditioned. You make that choice because you understand how trapped you otherwise are. So yes, I think we agree. That's good. Okay.
Madami Ajahn.
Yeah.
My question here pertains to the difference between the brain and the mind.
Okay.
So, yeah, I have a thought experiment discussion with my friend about how, nowadays in large language models, as well as like neural learning networks, neural networks, it's possible for us to construct something similar to like a mind, where it is capable of fabrications, it's capable of feelings, it's capable of memory, and to a certain extent, like consciousness as well. But how do I explain to maybe a non-Buddhist that the mind is not the same as the brain?
Okay. So first of all, I would say that the idea that LLMs, or artificial intelligence, has consciousness, I think that's completely wrong. Yeah? That's a real misunderstanding of how these things actually work. Yeah? And also they don't have feelings in the sense of actually they don't have any inner life. Yeah, there's no lights on inside the AI models or whatever they are. And so I think that is a very important point to realize that they are actually dead within, but sometimes it feels like they are real because the way they interact with you. I haven't done much interaction, but people say it feels like they are real human beings because they've been trained on human data, and so it sounds like they kind of replicate that very, very well. But there's no consciousness there, and I think it is impossible for them to ever be conscious. I don't think that can happen because consciousness arises through certain causes and conditions. And this is just a Buddhist point of view, right? So I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Buddhist. Yeah, everything comes from Buddhism. And so consciousness arises from a previous life. And so these AIs cannot really arise from a previous existence in that way. But so the Buddhist idea the difference between the brain and the mind is that one way of thinking about this, there are a number of ways, but one of the ways is to think of it as a kind of filter theory. And so the brain filters the mind. Yeah, and so the mind is much broader than the brain, but the brain constrains the mind. So when you die, you are released from that constraint, and then the mind exists independently of that brain. But while you live, you are constrained by that brain. So for example, if you have brain damage, that will affect the mind because it is constrained by that brain. That's kind of how you can understand why the mind seems to be equivalent to the brain, because you have brain damage, but actually it's not, because it's filtered through that brain. And that's why. So the moment you die, you're released from that brain, the mind is back to its healthy self again. That's one way of thinking about it. And I think that's very close to reality. I'll give you a really nice example of that. And this is the example of what is known as terminal lucidity. Have you heard about that?
No.
No? Okay, so terminal lucidity is the idea that when someone is close to dying, and people have like Alzheimer or some kind of dementia, so they're really out of it, they don't recognize their family members, they've been gone maybe for 10 years. In the very end of their life, just before they die, the last few hours, the last few days, they start recognizing the family members again. And that's kind of really weird, right? And this is apparently a very well-known phenomena in, around hospitals around the world. And from an ordinary scientific medical point of view, it makes no sense. Your brain is damaged. Your brain is completely out. Yeah, it's been damaged by Alzheimer for a long time. And the only way you can, but from a Buddhist point of view, actually it makes good sense, because as you are approaching death, your mind is starting to release from the material brain. And because it's starting to release, it is no longer constrained by that brain, as I was saying before, and is able to exist apart from that. And so that means it can bypass those degenerative circuits in the brain, whatever they are, and they can recognize their family members again, etc., etc. That's a really good example, and it shows that there is something to this idea of the filter theory of the mind. At the end of the day, Buddhism doesn't give a final theory about the connection between the brain and the mind, because that's not what Buddhism is about. Buddhism is not a philosophy. Buddhism is a way of life. And so you don't find that answer. But that is one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ajahn, for that pretty insightful example. I'll look it up. Thank you.
Good. Terminal lucidity. Check it out.
So in a nutshell, the brain basically is like a vessel that has placed some constraints or some boundaries to what consciousness and mind is about.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Is there anyone that have any more questions?
Over there.
Oh, there. Oh, right.
Good evening, Bante. I just want to separate between point 2 and point 3. Point 2 is where is actually when there's conditioning and so on. So I take it as reading a book, hanging out with the Buddha is just conditioning.
Yeah.
But the third point you heard about let the Dharma arise in you. Beside the toilet example, can you give a bit more of how let the Dharma arise in you?
Yeah. So the idea is that we often know enough about the Dhamma to know what is right and what is wrong. Yeah, and very often we are blocked from that. The ego blocks us from allowing the Dhamma to express itself because the ego wants to do things. The ego is driven by ill will. The ego is driven by delusion, obviously. It's kind of obvious, and by greed. And so if we act too quickly, we are allowing the ego to be in the driver's seat. And so very often you have to wait for the ego to die down. The Dhamma is inside of you, know what is right, but you have to allow that Dhamma to come to the surface. And often it means just waiting. Waiting till mindfulness is re-established. Your mind is more in balance. Sometimes if it is a big decision that you're going to make, sometimes you have to sit down and meditate, make yourself really peaceful. And suddenly the answer comes to you from deep within. You know that this is the right answer. And it happens usually when your mind is in a beautiful balance. It is not driven by these kind of powerful forces inside of us that are deluding us. So often it's just about waiting. Waiting for of course that is the Dhamma. I know that this is truth. This is coming from kindness, from compassion, from understanding. This is the truth. And then you act because you know you are on the right track. So basically it takes a lot of patience. And as you allow yourself to be patient in that way, you become a far better person actually just by slowing down a little bit and allowing the Dhamma to come out in this way. Okay, very good. Okay, one more question. Yeah.
Oh, we have to pass to another person at the moment.
So Ajahn, when a situation arises, a lot of time the feelings come up. We have ill will, aversions, unpleasant feeling, and if we want to wait for the Dhamma to arise, sometimes it's out of habit. Also, we may suppress the feeling, and we may mistaken that as we are patient and we wait for the Dhamma to arise. But we actually could be just rationalize it. Use the conceptual Dhamma to rationalize it. So how do we not fall into this trap?
Thank you. That's a very good point. So thank you for making that. But the fact that you are recognizing that problem means that you're always halfway to solving it. The fact that you recognize it, it means that you are already aware of what your mind does, and so you're not going to fall for that trick as easily because you are aware of it. So instead then of acting out of that false sense of suppression and a false sense of Dhamma understanding, actually you wait a little bit longer. You sit down to meditate. You listen to a nice Dhamma talk. You get into the right mood. You hear Ajahn Brahm's soothing voice, and he has all the kindness in the world, and you just feel so happy. And then the answer comes suddenly when you don't think about it. As long as you are thinking about it, waiting, when is the Dhamma going to rise? As long as you're waiting for that, it's not going to happen, right? But the moment you forget about it, and suddenly your mind is pure, then the answer comes to you. So I think you have largely solved that on your own because you're already aware of the issue. That is the most important part. Then you can find the way forward. But thank you. It's a very good question. So thank you for raising that point.
All right. So in the interest of time, we will allow one more question.
Hello, Ajahn. I love the talk. But I think a lot of us here are also working adults, and very often we work in very, very fast-paced situations where decisions have to be made within minutes. How do we then, do you have any practical advice as to how do we then try our best to allow the Dhamma to arise in this kind of very, very quick situations? And also at the same time, we can't really leave our jobs because...
So I would say that a lot of the decisions in life are not really critical from a Dhamma point of view. A lot of decisions that you have to do in work life, they are just kind of practical decisions. They're not really moral choices as such. And so it doesn't matter so much at that time. You can just make decisions quickly. Should I do this, should we have this as a customer, not as a customer, or whatever it might be that you have to choose. The moral choices are the important ones. So when you know that there is a moral choice, that is why you have to be very careful. So a lot of the time, just go with it. But now comes a moral choice. How can I speak to this person in a kind way or unkind way, right? And that is where you kind of have to be careful. So that is, I think, basically the most important thing here. Yeah. Okay, everyone. So that's it. Yeah. Yeah. So wonderful to meet you all. I wish you all the very best. May you have a lot of success with D-Cradle. Where's the boss? D-Cradle boss is over there. Mr. Tan. Dr. Tan or Mr. Tan? Well, whatever. Yeah, Professor Tan. So anyway, so very, very wonderful to be here and nice to see something other than BGF. Usually I just come to BGF. It's very nice to be here as well. So I wish you all the very best. Best of luck on the spiritual path. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ajahn, for enlightening us.
Yeah.
Pun intended. Right. So right now, we would like to invite the boss of the cradle, Didi Tan Pachai, to present a gift of appreciation.
Oh, okay.
To Ajahn.
Gee, I say. Wow.
And he got the coffee.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. That's wonderful. That is very, very kind of you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So right now, we will pass the microphone to Didi Hua Chai to give a few words.
Bhante allowed me to speak. Any one of you first time in the cradle? Welcome here and welcome to the cradle home. And I hope it is cozy enough. I would like to thank Bhante for coming over. Why I would like to say a few words here because I've been with Bhante for the last 5 days for the Sutta retreat. And Bhante wake up early morning and started the session about 8:30 and all the way to 4:30 to 5 o'clock. And it's very tiring. And for the last 5 days, Bhante has been doing that. And today also. And after that, he came over to the cradle home. And don't mind to say that, Bhante, we are on a 6th series in our age. When you hit the 6th series, your energy level are also being challenged. So I know it's not been very easy for Bhante to deliver his Dhamma sharing. And it takes a lot of compassion for you to do that for us, and we are very grateful. The gift that we give to you cannot speak for the kind of gratitude we have for you. So thank you, Bhante, for being here and showing us what true Dhamma is in helping to transform individuals. And that's basically our tagline, part of our tagline, to transform individuals. And whatever Bhante has shared today about reconditioning, or maybe, Daniel Goleman like to reuse the word called rewiring the mind and things like that. I think it's very important. This is in line with our core values of Buddha-inspired, Dhamma-guided, and self-transformed. I think this is very important for all Buddhists to know, not just to learn the Dhamma, but how do we take the Dhamma and put it into our daily living so that we become a different person, not driven by the past conditioning, but able to rise above that and to become a better person in life. And I think we have gotten that message from Bhante. Thank you for all your kindness and compassion. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you very much, Didi Hua Chai. So right now, we would like to invite Ajahn to conduct the sharing of merits.
Sharing of merits, yeah, of course, yeah, absolutely. So this is one of those beautiful things that we do as Buddhists, sharing the merits with our departed relatives specifically. So as we do the sharing, please bring it to mind and let your relatives know that you're sharing today's occasion with them. Edang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Edang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Edang me nyati nang hotu Sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.